Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about a stat that for every convert that we get to the Catholic faith, we lose 7 Catholics. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto. Secutor in principio et nunc et semper et secula seculorum. Amen. So the Pew Research Council, they do a lot of studies on a variety of topics, but I think the ones on religion, Christianity, and Catholicism I find to be interesting. And one of the stats that I've seen is that for every convert that we get, we lose 7 Catholics. And so I want to do a video on this as to just speculating as to why this is. Now, I do know converts. I do know Protestant converts that have entered the faith and have a fervent faith. And I've talked about this tangentially on the episode, Why Do Protestants Church Jump? Because if you look at the typical, let's say, 50-year-old Protestant, especially if they're from the evangelical brand, they've probably gone to at least 4 or 5 mega churches in their lifetime, and they just jump from church to church and church. And eventually I talk about what's the course on sometimes how they jump to Catholicism. But either way, what can be said about this? Why for every 1 convert we get 7 that are leaving? I think there's a lot of possible theories. I mean, I think the easiest guess or speculation is just poor catechesis. And we've had poor catechesis. Really, if you look at it, the easy answer is to say since Vatican Council II. But to be honest, we've always had relatively poor catechesis. This is a problem we've had throughout all of church history. You see corruption among the clergy, poor training of the clergy, and poor catechesis among the Catholic faithful. Now the difference was back prior to, let's say, 80 years ago, Catholics, especially in America, lived in neighborhoods, and they were kind of ghettoized the way that the Jews were ghettoized by Christians for most of the Middle Ages. And so that kind of protected the Catholic, the ethnic Catholic, the Polacks or the Italians or the Czechs or the Irish or whoever they were, kind of kept them insulated. So they really weren't exposed to a lot of Protestantism or certainly atheism and the virulent strands of Marxism and communism and so forth. And I think that helped protect them. And then as the Catholics got more normalized into American culture and fled to the suburbs, then you saw things change. But we've always had poor catechesis. You know, we have this kind of halcyon view that catechesis was great prior to Vatican II when we had the Baltimore Catechism, but really we've always had poor catechesis. I think what's definitely contributed is just the rise of secularization. Because you see this trend in Protestantism as well, especially the mainline Protestantism. So you see people leaving Christianity in general, the spiritual but not religious, or the non-affiliated religious people. That number has increased quite a bit. So at this point in America, and I've talked about it maybe a week ago, that only 60% of Americans identify as Christian, and then Christian with a denomination. Of course, Catholicism isn't a denomination, but identifying with a Christian group. And that number has gone up 25% in just a couple of decades. And so you see this trend of secularization, and I think that's just picking off most of the people. It doesn't help that, yes, catechesis is bad, and it doesn't help the way we do catechesis. Tomorrow's video is going to be on why are we doing confirmation at 14. But it's partly due to that. I think that the way we do catechesis is lacking, certainly. And the system that we have of going to Sunday school on Sundays or maybe during the week just to knock out the sacraments is a bad mindset, to knock out the sacraments. And then for confirmation, right, well, it's 14, let's do the service projects we got to do or whatever it is at the typical parish to knock out confirmation, right? And so there's no continuing education. So you see that the catechesis is pretty poor in the first place. And you know, again, it's not necessarily the teacher's fault. It's just the way the system is built in this world where I think everyone is struggling. And then you look at, since we've had multiple generations of poor catechesis, you have parents who don't know the faith that well. And if you have parents who don't know the faith that well and don't understand that they are the primary educator of their child vis-a-vis the faith, how are they expected to pass on the importance of the faith to their children when they themselves barely know it? They go to Mass, they don't understand why they're even going to Mass, maybe they don't even go to Mass weekly, and then they just expect through the process of osmosis that their kids will learn the faith and, more importantly, appreciate the importance of the faith just by going, when most kids are checked out. The average Catholic child has checked out of their faith by age 12. So the system that we have isn't working. So you see, the parents don't know the faith that well. The kids aren't going to know the faith. What else? Why do adult Catholics leave the faith? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Typically, it's pastorally. So there's this combination where they don't really know the faith, and then something pastorally happens. Either they had a bad confession, or there was a priest that was rude to them, or somebody in the family died and they wanted to cremate the ashes and wear some of the ashes in a necklace, and the priest said no, and they got mad about that. Or perhaps they got civilly divorced, and they wanted to remarry, and the priest said no, we couldn't do that. All these things, right? They get upset, and then they'll go to a mega church, which will do that. And we have an episode that's I mean, you could say it's cynically titled, but Protestantism is lazy Christianity. But on one level it is, because they allow divorce and remarriage with no problems. They kind of have, they have specious theology that is comforting to most people, like salvation by faith alone, and for other reasons. So when you have this dangling as an option, or even more drastic would just be regular secularization, regular secular postmodernist values of religion's not that important, kind of the agnostic, who cares, or just outright atheism and materialism. I mean, this is going to be a siren song to a lot of people who feel alienated by the faith because of pastoral reasons. Whether or not the priest was doing the right thing, like telling them, no, you can't remarry unless you get an annulment, or they do a wrong thing, like for example, they alienated somebody in confession. But typically people leave the faith because of they're not getting it in here. Like, they don't understand the importance of having Christianity in their life. Well, we can specify just Catholicism here, but really in Christianity in general, they don't understand the importance. Like, why do I need this in my life? And it was different in 1940 because we were all kind of in our Catholic ghettos, and we certainly didn't have television, internet, all these things now that are siren songs to secular values. And it was just a different time. It was a much more innocent time than it is now. And so you just see that even well-intentioned Catholic parents, if they're raising their kids in any sort of just modern milieu that we have today, with Disney and with television and with not really praying together, doing rosaries together, you're going to see that these kids, as they grow up, and these adults as they grow up, they just don't see the faith as important. Why do I need this? Plus, they're always getting the message that you believe in that hocus pocus Christianity? How can you believe in that? Ha ha ha. And you certainly get this when you get to college and at work. And so there's just a lot of these kind of centrifugal forces, not centripetal, that are just pushing all Christians away, and in particular Catholics away. There's just a lot of factors. Another factor is you go to a secular university or you go to public high school, and then you start learning secular values, or maybe you have a girlfriend who's not a Catholic. Certainly you go to college, this will happen. You could be a well-intentioned Catholic, and a lot of well-intentioned Catholic teenagers go to college, and within a semester they've lost their faith. Part of it is just because of the Marxism, the cultural Marxism that's in the large majority of universities, including Catholic universities. Or they just meet somebody of the opposite sex that they fall in love with, and that person maybe is a Lutheran or evangelical or an atheist or I don't care, an agnostic, and they'll just leave their faith. And why would they leave their faith? Because a lot of people who love their faith would never consider leaving their faith. But a lot of Catholics would leave their faith for the right person. Why? Because they don't think their faith is that important. Why? Because they were never taught that their faith was that important, either by their parents or their Sunday school teachers. Plus, you have this gigantic behemoth that is secularism, that is just eating up all Christians. I have an episode here, how Christian groups need to stop fighting amongst themselves and see who the greater enemy is, and that is atheism, secularism, because they're poaching both Catholics and Orthodox, and Mormons, and all the Protestant denominations as well. So look, I mean, we could talk about this for 30 minutes as to why so many Catholics are leaving the faith. It's not because we lack veracity, we lack the truth. We are the true church created by Jesus Christ. But part of it is indifferentism, right? Well, you know, Buddhists go to heaven, atheists go to heaven, we all go to heaven. This is this message that pervades not just secularism, but can pervade a lot of Catholic parishes where you hear this. So you have this like, well, if everybody's going to heaven and the devil doesn't exist, why do I need to go to be Catholic? And then why do I have to go through all the difficult things about being a Catholic? I can only marry once? What? You know, I can't contracept? What? I can't get drunk? What? So it's all a lack of understanding the importance of the faith. Plus you just have this easy, tantalizing, low dangling fruit, which is Protestant megachurches, which make you feel the faith, right? Because it's all about emotion and feeling. And look, if you're really grounded in your Catholic faith and you know the importance of the sacraments and being in the true church founded by Jesus Christ, you wouldn't even be tempted to go to an evangelical church. But as I've mentioned before, it's like Protestants poach the ignorant, low information Catholics, the ones who don't know their faith that well. You worship Mary. We do worship Mary. We're any well-informed Catholic knows we don't worship Mary as a goddess. So they poach our low information ones. But we poach, and this is not to brag, but we poach the high information Protestants, like Cardinal Newman's of the 19th century, Cardinal from England. Those who read history cease to be Protestant. We tend to, and you can see this like in the Coming Home Network over at EWTN, where the Grodi family interview Protestants who've entered the faith. And you see the large majority of these people are well-read, maybe even Protestant pastors who realize, oh, wow, we do have the writings of Justin Martyr and Ignatius of Antioch and Irenaeus of Lyon. Oh, wow, these guys are really Catholic. Oh. Either way, guys, it is disheartening. And look, certainly some of you are from traditionalist circles or you go to traditional parishes where this is not really a problem. But I would tell you, I've quoted this stat before on the number one thing homeschooling Catholic parents need to do to make sure that their faith is continued on to their kids is 6% of Catholic children who go to public school will be practicing their faith in 10 years. And it's only 12% who go to a private Catholic school. 12%. Homeschooling, it's going to be higher, but don't get this idea. Don't be complacent if you send your kids to a private Catholic school. Oh, they're going to be Catholic. 12%. No, it's just that we're not in the world where even a few decades ago, like the most important influence on children were their parents and their church. Now the most important influence on children is social media, is television in large majority of cases. And you could be a well-intentioned parent who wants their kids to grow up in the faith, but well-intentioned was the road to whatever, road to hell is paved in good intentions. It doesn't matter what your good intentions are. So in closing, if you have children or you plan to have children, know your faith, educate yourself on the faith, and more importantly, educate your children on the importance of the faith and how it can bring them meaning in this nihilistic, hedonistic, secularistic world that we live in. Why is it such a tantalizing option to have Christianity in your life? And isolate, and I would say, especially if the kids are younger, limit the interaction of social media, if not eliminate social media, pop culture, and all these things, because yes, leisure is great, but this entertainment is not Christian at all. How many times has Jesus Christ ever been mentioned in a Disney movie? Never. So understand that as well. Guys, post in the comments. This is one of those episodes I'd really like to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.